Right, today we are going to go over reactivating the patients that you thought you lost. So, as the little snippet there points out, whether it's due to COVID or lots of other reasons, there's oftentimes patients who are not coming back into the office, whether they've no-showed, they canceled their appointment, they don't reschedule their next appointment. And so these are a few of the things that we've done over at Vital Interaction to help out our customers in tracking down and reaching out to these patients. So a few things that I like to consider before even diving in and making sure that this is an issue, before you try and solve something that's not an issue, is figuring out, what is your current process now for tracking down those patients who haven't scheduled? Do you have a process? Are you sending postcards? Are you manually emailing them? Are you, do you have a staff that's calling out to these patients to try and get them back in? And then with that, how much staff time is that taking? If you are doing something, if you do have a process, how much time is it taking the staff to make those calls or send those postcards out? How much are stamps costing if you're doing that? And then the next question is, how many patients might still be slipping through? So whether you have a process or not, are there patients who might be slipping through? How many times have you reached out to them, called out to them, and then they still don't schedule? So then just taking an assessment of that with all of those questions asked, how much is it costing you? How much staff time? How much revenue in appointments that are lost is it causing you? So those are the base questions that we like to start out with before we decide if this is something that we want to try and solve. So from there, what have we done at Vital Interaction? So what we've done is we basically combined two tools. One is a list building tool. So basically using criteria that is given to us by a practice, we make a list with that criteria that then produces a list of patients. And then the second tool is the automatic reaching out to those patients. So based on the list that we created, who are we now reaching out to? We'll reach out to them, voice, call, text, email. We'll use all three of those methods of communication to try and get the response from the patient. So I built just a couple of examples of what this might look like. So the first is one of the most simple ones that we do is just based on canceled appointments. So the way that this one is here is you see this this top field. You'll see some of this may not mean as much to you, but basically what this means to us is this is going to look at all of the patients who canceled an appointment in the last 2 days. So we've filtered this by canceled appointment, which is this number 9 here, the status ID, and all the appointments in the last 2 days. So that's our first list, all patients who had a canceled appointment in the last 2 days. So we see we have 37 results, but we don't want to just send a message out immediately to them. What we want to do is we then want to subtract. So we build a similar list like this, but we actually subtract it instead of add it. Any patients that have rescheduled. So if they canceled their appointment in the last 2 days, but then they had an appointment today, or they rescheduled somewhere in the next month or however long we have your schedule. If they've rescheduled, then we'll actually subtract them from the list. That way we're not reaching out to a bunch of people who have already rescheduled their appointment. So now we have 14 patients left, and that's our leftovers of who we need to reach out to make sure that they schedule. Another example is a much more broad looking scope at things is saying, okay, maybe we want to just look at everyone who's had an appointment in the last 3 years. So that's what this is signifying. That's in days. Let's look at everyone who's had an appointment in the last 3 years. And now what you do is let's subtract anyone who's had an appointment in the last year, or they have a future appointment scheduled. And so now we've got a list of, hey, here's people that we haven't seen in at least a year, but it might be good to check up on them and see if it's time for them to schedule their appointment. And that verbiage in the message can be completely customized, sending an email, a text, a voice call to them, or a series or a layer of those that are going out to the patient. So I put just a few examples. This is by no means an exhaustive list. It's really up to your imagination, but some of the ones that we've done in the past. So one of which is just here up at the top based on appointment type. So let's say we want to include every patient that had this specific appointment type, and then they didn't have this appointment type after 7 days or after 14 days or 30 days, however long that may be. We want to reach out to that patient if they haven't rescheduled this next appointment type, or this next appointment with this type after a certain amount of time. The second one is also just a very simple one. Let's find everyone who's no-showed their appointment in the last day, and we'll reach out to them to try and get them to reschedule their appointment if they haven't already rescheduled. The third one I like a lot because it really helps to fill in the gaps. So if you're using recalls in your current system, or we're doing some of these reactivations, then we can insert basically that recall or that reactivation, and we say, okay, if we sent that first recall out to them and they still didn't schedule after 30 days or after 60 days, however long you want, we can reach out to them again and say, hey, we noticed that you haven't scheduled, or your health is very important to us. Please call our office to schedule. Do whatever you need to there. The fourth one is where it gets complicated, but has the ability and potential to produce a ton of really specific results, but using stuff like diagnosis code, or both CPT or ICD code, depending on what system you're on, we can integrate with that. So that we can then use those codes to send out messages to really specific people to make sure that they are taken care of, that continuation of care is there. So those are a few of the examples. As I said, not an exhaustive list. It's really up to your imagination of what you want to use. And then one of the final pieces that's super important is simply just being able to track all of this. So, whether you have a system in place now, it can be important to make sure that you're tracking what's happening. And so we would have the ability to go in, or you would have the ability to go in and see, hey, what recalls or what reactivations have I set up? And then looking at, okay, what is the success of those? So, when we sent this message out to these 86 people or whatever, none of those people had an appointment. Now, after we sent that message out, now we see that 30 of them do have an appointment. So that shows that out of all those people who didn't have an appointment, they've now scheduled after we sent a message. And that way, you and us can have a transparent, just look at, hey, is it successful or is it not successful? And making sure that you're on the same page there. So if this is something that has been plaguing you for the last months, or something that you want to learn more about, as we said, it's not always the perfect fit, but if it is, we'd love to help you out with it and see if we can help reactivate some of those patients that you're needing to see. So feel free to reach out to our sales team, and we'll be happy to help you.